Hello, I'm Laurel Wingfield. I'm back with an abridged version of Chapter 4 of my book, Alice and her Best Friends Forever, Book 1, Jane's Secret. I'll begin reading now. Friday. Mrs. Archer arrived at 8:30 a.m. Alice was waiting in the lounge, watching through the lace curtains, and she was at the front door before Mrs. Archer was, opening it even as she still had her hand raised to press the front door bell. Mrs. Archer smiled at her and said, "Ready? Come on then." Alice could see Jane, who was waiting in the back of the car. She waved when she saw Alice. Alice climbed into the back seat of the car, a sleek, white people carrier, and grinned at Jane. There was no one to see Alice off. Her mother had had to work the night shift, which meant she had had to work a double shift, and had gone to bed, and her father had already left for work. As the car approached the school, they had to slow to a crawl. There were dozens of other parents taking their children to the front entrance of the school too. Mrs. Archer dropped them off in front of the school gate, and as Jane and Alice scrambled out of the car in a hurry, Mrs. Archer said, "Bye." She grinned at Jane. "Be good." "Mum," Jane groaned. And another day at Park House Senior School began. The children streamed into the school buildings to their tutor groups. The Best Friends Forever and Leo's gang were in the same tutor group. Alice was curious to know what they would do this morning when they saw her and Jane. She was still unsure of what had happened yesterday, but Jane had had something to do with it. She needn't have worried. Leo and his cronies were not in tutor group. That was not surprising. They often bunked off school. The first lesson of the day was science, and Friday was biology day. After science, there was IT, then morning break. The Best Friends Forever went to the playing field and showed off handstands to each other. Jane and Linda tried to outdo each other, and the other girls couldn't decide which of them was the best. Still, there was no sign of Leo's gang. They looked like they were not going to turn up. When they went to the toilets, there was the usual crowd of older children in there, smoking. They didn't bother the best friends, but they would pick on any children who were alone. After the bell was rung to end break time, there was PE. Today, it was netball for the girls and football for the boys. Alice was all right in PE, although it was not her favourite lesson. In PE, the two most popular girls in the class were chosen to be team leaders. They picked, alternately, the other girls to be in their teams until only the social outcasts were left. Alice saw Jane looking hard at these sorry dregs of the social hierarchy, and she looked sad. Alice knew her well enough by now to know that Jane was wondering if she could be friends with any of them. Jane was good at knowing the right way to treat people. She had a way of seeing things that others didn't. The netball session was quite good. Alice may not have looked athletic, but she liked being active and feeling the blood pumping around her body, and she liked netball even more when she managed to keep the ball and score a goal. After PE, they had maths with Mr. Singer. Then it was lunchtime. The children went into lunch in two groups, since the dining hall was not big enough to hold everyone at once. Some kids had packed lunches or went home for lunch. The other children would be sorted into two groups by a teacher who was on playground duty that day. Alice, Jane, Linda, Rashpal and Stephanie were in the second group that day. As they waited in the playground for the sound of the whistle that signalled that the second group should go in for lunch, Jane said that she wanted to look for one of the girls who had been the last to be chosen for PE that day, to see if she wanted to be friends with them. Her name was Alison Moore, and the bullies picked on her, and the popular children excluded her, partly because she had a stammer. Looking to increase the size of their gang made sense to the others. They had all seen gangs of bullies turn away from them, when they had seen how many of them there were. The best friends all looked around, but it was hard to see people in that milling mass of children. She'll probably be hiding away, Stephanie said. Before you wanted to be friends with me, I used to hide away in all sorts of places. I didn't want to be found by the bullies. But they always found me, she added sadly. They knew where to look. Jane stopped looking around the playground and seemed to be deep in thought. Then she said, let's try looking around the back of the gym. We might not hear the dinner whistle if we go there, Stephanie said. Jane looked at her watch. We have enough time just to look, she said. Who's coming? We're the best friends forever, Rashpal declared proudly. We'll all go together. So they did. They hurried across the playground, around school buildings, and found Alison behind the gym, just like Jane had said. She was in the middle of a gang of boys who were pushing her around. It was Leo, Brian, Joel, and Dermot, of course, with 2 other boys the girls didn't know. By the time Alice, Jane, and the best friends forever arrived, the contents of Alison's school bag were scattered all around, and she was in tears. The boys were kicking her pencil cases, books, and other things around, laughing with malicious glee. Alice remembered that not only did Alison have a stammer, she was also shy and was never noticed, except by the bullies. Because of her stammer, she never spoke and kept her head down all the time. She never cried out, never tried to protest, never tried to shout for help. If she tried, the boys would only torment her more. She made very little sound, enduring the assault in near silence. Alison was trying to hang on to her glasses, which Brian had knocked off her face and grabbed. Both had hold of them, and Brian was twisting them. They were broken and ruined. Leo was holding a mobile phone, and by the way he was examining it, Alice guessed that it didn't belong to him, but to Alison. He had taken it, and now thought of it as his. He was pressing buttons, looking at the numbers. "Ooh, Granny," he crowed. "You've got your Granny's number here." Then he looked up and saw the best friends forever. He glared at them, backed up by his gang. Joel said, "Here's the best freaks forever," and the boys all laughed. But the girls had heard that joke before, and it hadn't been funny the first time either. They showed no signs of being intimidated, and the laughter faded. The boys and girls regarded each other with hostility. "What are you looking at?" Leo challenged them at last. The best friends forever just stood and stared at them. Then Alice bravely retorted, "Look at you lot. You're so brave. It takes all of you to pick on one little girl." Leo swore at them. "Yeah? You going to do something about it?" he added. "Leave Alison alone," Jane said simply. "Yeah? You're going to make us?" Leo again. As well as being gang leader, he seemed to do most of the talking. "Come on then," Dermot sneered. "Come on then. What can you do? You're just a bunch of girly girls. Run away crying and find a teacher." And then suddenly, inexplicably, the look on Leo's face changed. It transformed from a sneer of confidence to a look of horror and disbelief. The other boys were not great at empathy, but finally they realized that something was wrong when Leo looked in horror down at his own feet. No, not at his feet. At the dark stain that was spreading across the tops of his trouser legs. The other boys stared in disbelief for several seconds. Then they moved away from him, their faces distorting in disgust. Then, unable to stop themselves, they started laughing. Once they were beyond the range of the smell, they all laughed, raucously, shrieking. They pointed at Leo, at the dark stain that was spreading down his legs. Leo screamed. It was an awful sound of rage, disgust, helplessness. It must have been his worst nightmare come true. He turned and ran then, no longer the fearsome bully, but ashamed and disgraced. He even dropped the phone. His gang chased him, yelling at him. They flowed around the corner of the gymnasium building and were gone, their yells diminishing into the distance. That's the end of Chapter 4 of Alice and the Best Friends Forever, Jane's Secret. I hope you enjoyed that, and you'll be back next week for Chapter 5. Until then, take care. Goodbye.